The gleaming floors of the luxurious apartment reflected the setting sun's light as I stood there, feeling a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Mark, my partner for the last 6 years, beamed with an unsettling pride. "We're going to live here, Emily. In this high-rise paradise," he announced, gesturing grandly at the lavish living room. I blinked, trying to process his words. "A high-rise apartment, Mark? What are you talking about?" "Our new home, obviously," he replied with a smirk, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My mind raced. We had never discussed moving, let alone affording such an extravagant place. "Where did the money come from?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mark's smile widened, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. "It's the insurance money, darling, the one left by your late husband." I felt my heart sink. He was talking about the inheritance from my first husband, the love of my life, who had passed away tragically. That money was a painful reminder, not a resource to flaunt. Before I could respond, the door clicked open, and in walked Linda, Mark's overbearing mother. "Why are you here?" I asked, trying to mask my growing unease. Without a word, Linda sauntered in, her eyes scanning the luxurious space. "I've been waiting for this, Mark. Is it about the apartment?" she inquired, her voice laced with greed. "Yes, Mom. Please, take a seat," Mark replied, gesturing towards the plush sofa. Their exchange confirmed my worst fears. Not only had Mark decided on this place without consulting me, but he had also involved his mother in this scheme. I felt utterly betrayed. Then Mark dropped his bombshell. "We're going to live here, the three of us. It's decided." I felt a surge of anger. How can you make such a decision without even asking me? "If you don't like it, Emily, we can always get a divorce. I don't mind," Mark said coldly, his eyes not meeting mine. I stood there, speechless at his audacity. Linda, meanwhile, smirked maliciously. "Don't look so shocked, Emily. You'll manage all the household chores, won't you?" Their plan was clear as day. Not only had Mark signed a lease for this apartment using my money, but he also intended to treat me like nothing more than a maid. I had been juggling my job and household responsibilities, but this was beyond the pale. I excused myself and went to the bedroom. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer and took out the envelope I had prepared, hoping I would never need to use it. I returned to the living room and handed it to Mark. "What is this?" he asked, his smile fading. "A divorce paper. I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The shock on their faces was palpable. Mark looked at his mother, who was equally stunned. They had not anticipated this move from me, but I had reached my breaking point. The following morning, as I sat alone in a small cafe, my mind wandered back through the years. My first marriage to Alex had been a haven of love and mutual respect. He was a gentle soul, an investor who believed in the power of quiet success. We lived a life filled with genuine happiness, until the day a devastating call shattered my world. "Mrs. Carter, there's been an accident. Please come to the hospital immediately." The voice on the other end was calm, but it carried a weight that sank deep into my heart. By the time I arrived, Alex was gone. I was 30 then, and his death left me in a void where time seemed to stand still. The inheritance he left behind became a distant thought, overshadowed by grief. It was during this period of mourning that I met Mark. He was a colleague at the securities company where I worked. "Are you okay, Emily?" he would often ask, his voice laced with a concern that felt comforting at the time. We started going out for meals, and he listened to my stories and complaints with what seemed like genuine interest. In hindsight, I realize I might have been an easy target, vulnerable and alone. When Mark proposed, I was 34. It wasn't that I had forgotten Alex, but I craved companionship, a shoulder to lean on. My family had reservations, especially my sister, who lived abroad and enjoyed her independent life. "But I've made my decision," I told her, determined yet unaware of the impending storm. My marriage to Mark started on a hopeful note, but it wasn't long before the cracks began to show, widened by the intrusive presence of his mother, Linda. "Susan, you'll be following my instructions from now on," Linda declared on one of her first visits to our home. Her tone was commanding, presumptuous, and it set the stage for what was to become a tumultuous relationship. Mark initially played the mediator, but his true colors soon surfaced. The day everything changed was when I mentioned Alex's background as an investor. Mark's eyes lit up. A spark that I didn't recognize then, but now understood all too well. It was greed. "Why didn't you tell me about your first husband's wealth?" Mark demanded one evening, his tone accusatory. "I didn't think it was important," I replied, taken aback by his sudden interest in my past. His behavior became increasingly erratic after that. Days off work under false pretenses, mysterious searches through our belongings. The man I married was slowly unraveling, driven by an obsession with the wealth he imagined was hidden away. It all came to a head that fateful day when I found myself locked out of my own home, pushed out by Mark and Linda as they rifled through my possessions, searching for a fortune that existed only in their minds. Standing outside my own home, feeling the cold bite of the lock that barred my entry, something within me snapped. It wasn't just the betrayal or the greed that stung so deeply. It was the utter disrespect and disregard for our shared life. Mark and Linda had crossed a line from which there was no return. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I called my sister, the one person who always offered clarity amidst chaos. Her voice was a lifeline as I recounted the events. "Emily, this is beyond acceptable. They're clearly after your money," she said, her tone a mix of anger and concern. I spent the night at a nearby hotel, thoughts racing. By morning, my decision was clear. I would no longer be a pawn in their greedy game. I returned home, armed not just with legal documents, but a newfound resolve. The scene I walked into was almost farcical. Linda and Mark were rummaging through drawers, their desperation palpable. Their heads turned sharply as I entered. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I asked, my voice steady. Mark's face reddened. "This is none of your concern, Emily. You should learn your place." His words were like fuel to my fire. "My place? My place is not here, being disrespected and used by the likes of you," I retorted. Linda chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "You should be grateful, Emily. We're only taking what's rightfully ours." The audacity of her claim was astounding. This woman, who had never contributed anything to our household, was now claiming rights to my past, my pain, my inheritance. "That's where you're wrong, Linda. Nothing here belongs to you. And as for you, Mark, our marriage is over," I declared, holding out the divorce papers. Their shock was evident, but it was overshadowed by my sense of empowerment. For too long, I had allowed them to dictate the terms of my life. No more. Mark's arrogance faltered as he realized I was serious. "You'll regret this, Emily. You're nothing without me." But his words no longer held any power over me. I had seen the truth behind his facade, and I was done playing his games. With the divorce papers left on the table, I walked out of that house, out of that life. It was the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something new, something that was entirely my own. As the plane soared above the clouds, a sense of freedom enveloped me. I was en route to join my sister abroad, leaving behind the chaos and deceit. The decision to leave was not just an escape. It was a strategic move in a game that Mark and Linda had unwittingly initiated. My sister Julia greeted me at the airport with open arms. "Welcome to your new beginning, Emily," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement and a hint of mischief. Julia had always been the adventurous one, and her spirit was infectious. We settled into her cozy apartment, where we plotted our next move over cups of steaming coffee. "So they think they can just use you and throw you away?" "We'll see about that," Julia said, her determination mirroring my own. Our plan was twofold: secure my financial assets and legal standing, then strike back. With Julia's connections, we quickly found a top-notch lawyer who specialized in international finance. He assured us that my assets were untouchable to Mark and Linda. "But what about revenge?" I asked, the burning need for justice simmering within me. "Patience, Emily. Revenge is a dish best served cold," Julia replied, a sly smile on her lips. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. We moved my finances to a secure offshore account and began building a case against Mark and Linda for their fraudulent activities. The evidence was overwhelming: forged signatures, unauthorized transactions, and clear attempts to siphon my inheritance. But the real satisfaction came when we learned through our legal channels that Mark and Linda were struggling. The high-rise apartment was draining their finances, and without access to my assets, they were drowning in debt. "Looks like they're getting a taste of their own medicine," Julia remarked one evening as we reviewed the latest update from our lawyer. It was more than just poetic justice. It was a reckoning for their greed and betrayal. I found myself smiling, not out of spite, but because for the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my own destiny. Sitting in the dimly lit office of our lawyer, I felt a surge of vindication as he detailed the latest developments. Mark and Linda's financial woes had escalated. The high-rise apartment, once a symbol of their greed, had become an albatross around their necks. They were on the verge of losing it. "It seems they underestimated you, Emily," the lawyer said with a hint of admiration. "They did," I replied, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "But what's our next move?" "We strike legally and let them drown in their own mistakes," he suggested, outlining a plan to press charges for their fraudulent activities. Julia and I exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between us. This was more than just about winning. It was about setting things right. Over the next few weeks, we watched as our plan unfolded. The legal notices served to Mark and Linda were the final nails in the coffin of their scheming. They were summoned to court to answer for their actions. The day of the court hearing, I watched from a distance as Mark and Linda, looking haggard and defeated, entered the courthouse. The arrogance and smugness that once defined them were gone, replaced by a palpable sense of fear and despair. As the legal proceedings dragged on, the extent of their deceit became public. Forged documents, misappropriated funds, and blatant lies were laid bare for all to see. The judge's verdict was swift and merciless. Mark and Linda were found guilty of fraud and faced hefty fines and potential jail time. The high-rise apartment was to be seized and sold off to pay their debts. "This is what happens when greed takes over," Julia whispered to me as we watched them being led away. The sweet taste of revenge was satisfying, but more than that, it was the sense of justice being served that filled me with an inner peace. I had not only protected myself and my assets, but had also ensured that Mark and Linda could no longer harm anyone else. As we left the courthouse, I felt a chapter of my life closing. I was ready to move forward, free from the shadows of betrayal that had loomed over me. The sun was setting over the city skyline as I stood on the balcony of Julia's apartment, a sense of serenity enveloping me. The legal battle was over, and with it, a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Mark and Linda's downfall was not just a victory for me, it was a testament to the strength I had found within myself. "Here's to new beginnings," Julia said, handing me a glass of champagne. We clinked our glasses, the sound echoing the new chapter that was unfolding in my life. The next morning, I woke up to a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I had decided to stay abroad and start anew. The city was bustling with opportunities, and for the first time in a long while, I felt excited about the future. As I ventured into the streets, the vibrant energy of the city invigorated me. I explored quaint cafes, art galleries, and bustling markets, each step further distancing me from the pain of my past. But it wasn't just about exploring new places. I started attending workshops and networking events, reconnecting with my passion for finance and investing. The world, once so narrow and confined, had opened up in myriad ways. One evening, as Julia and I dined at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Curiosity piqued, I answered. "Emily, it's Mark," came the voice, hesitant and broken. I felt a jolt of surprise followed by a calm detachment. "What do you want, Mark?" I wanted to apologize. "For everything," he stammered. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm truly sorry." I paused, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. "Your apology doesn't erase the past, Mark. You made your choices, and you faced the consequences." I know. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." I looked out at the sprawling city lights, a symbol of my newfound freedom and strength. "I've moved on, Mark, and I suggest you do the same." Ending the call, I turned back to Julia, who was watching me with a knowing look. "That was Mark. He apologized." "And how do you feel?" she asked gently. "Indifferent," I replied, smiling. "I've let go of the anger and the pain. What matters now is this moment, this life that I'm building." We spent the rest of the evening talking about our plans and dreams, the city's lights twinkling like stars of promise and hope. Months passed, and life in the new city became a rhythm of exhilarating experiences and personal growth. I had immersed myself in a world where my past sorrows were just distant echoes, overshadowed by the bright prospects of the present. One brisk morning, as I sipped my coffee in a quaint little cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend back home. Curiosity piqued. I opened the message and felt a rush of emotions as I read the words. Mark and Linda have hit rock bottom. The apartment was seized and they've been shunned by everyone. Karma at its finest. A part of me felt a pang of pity for them, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of their betrayal and greed. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. Later that day, I shared the news with Julia. "Do you feel any satisfaction knowing they got what they deserved?" she asked. "I thought I would, but now it just feels like a closed chapter. They're no longer a part of my story," I replied, a sense of closure washing over me. As days turned into weeks, I found myself less and less consumed by thoughts of Mark and Linda. My days were filled with work that I loved, evenings spent exploring the city with Julia, and weekends indulging in my newfound hobby of painting. It was during one of these painting sessions that I received another call from back home. This time, it was Linda. "Emily, I need your help," she said, her voice quivering with desperation. I was taken aback. "Why would you think I would help you, Linda, after everything you've done?" "I know I have no right to ask, but we're in trouble. We have nothing left," she pleaded. The old me might have felt compelled to help, to fix things. But I had grown, evolved beyond the reach of their manipulative clutches. "Linda, I've moved on. I suggest you do the same and find a way to fix your own mess," I said firmly before hanging up. Turning back to my canvas, I realized how far I had come. The colors on the palette seemed brighter, the strokes more confident. I was no longer the woman haunted by the shadows of betrayal. I was Emily, an artist, an investor, a free spirit charting her own course. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the city as I stood on the balcony, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The air was filled with the promise of new beginnings, a stark contrast to the turmoil that once engulfed my life. Julia joined me, her presence a constant reminder of the support and love that had helped me navigate through the darkest of times. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her gaze following the skyline. "I'm thinking about how much has changed," I replied. "There was a time when I thought I'd never escape the shadow of Mark and Linda's betrayal, but now here I am, feeling more alive than ever." Julia nodded, understanding the depth of my words. "You've come a long way, Emily. You're not just a survivor, you're a thriver." Her words resonated with me, affirming the transformation that had occurred within. The chapter of Mark and Linda was closed, their presence in my life reduced to mere footnotes in my story. As I continued to build my new life, I found joy in the small things. The chatter of the city, the laughter shared with Julia, the satisfaction of a job well done. I had rediscovered my passion for investing and was making strides in the financial world, a testament to the resilience and strength I had honed. One evening, as Julia and I sat in our favorite cafe, a familiar song played in the background. It was a melody that Alex and I had loved, a bittersweet reminder of a past life. For a moment, I allowed myself to reminisce, to embrace the memories without the pain that once accompanied them. "Are you okay?" Julia asked, noticing the change in my expression. "I am," I said, smiling. "I was just remembering Alex, but it's different now. The memories bring comfort, not pain." It was true. The journey of revenge and retribution had led me to a place of peace, a place where I could honor my past without being chained to it. As we walked back home under the starlit sky, I realized that this was just the beginning. There were still many chapters to be written, many adventures to be had. But one thing was certain. I was the author of my own story, a story of triumph over adversity, of finding light in the darkness. And with that thought, I stepped into the future, ready for whatever it might hold, armed with the knowledge that whatever came my way, I was strong enough to face it.